This is our first section, our first topic, which is in our chemistry unit, and it's on chemical storage and disposal. This is not working great. It says, when using chemicals, you should always keep the following 3 questions in mind. So when we're looking at chemicals, we should always be thinking of these things. And the first thing is, does the substance have special handling or storage requirements? So if we look at the picture below here, we might see something that you would have in your house, and you probably don't necessarily have any special way of handling it or anything, but there is specific things that it might say on the bottle or ways to store it that you should be, I guess, aware of. It says, how will it react with other substances? So some substances can't, be stored next to each other. Like, you can't put the bottles next to each other. And mostly it's due to the fact that they might have some sort of reaction together. So if one bottle spilled or something and they each of the chemicals were able to mix, or if there was gases coming out of the bottles and they were to mix in the air, they could have a chemical reaction, and that could be in the form of fire, that could be in the form of an explosion. Those are things that we really want to avoid, obviously. So those are some things we need to take into consideration. And then how should it be disposed of? So a lot of things you can't just pour down the drain. And we probably do that, but there's many chemicals in our life that we shouldn't be pouring down the drain. And there's ways that we should dispose of them. And one of them might be when I lived in Wetaskiwin, they have like a chemical roundup. So basically all these chemicals that you shouldn't be, just throwing in the garbage or putting down the drain. You can bring them and they will dispose of them properly. So they will combust them or whatever they need to do to get rid of them. So those are all things you need to take into consideration when you're dealing with chemicals. WHMIS and MSDS. So you guys have probably heard about this before. You'll talk about it in every science class, at least I do. But WHMIS and MSDS, WHMIS is Workplace Hazardous Material Information System. That is a system basically that tells you a lot of stuff about chemicals. It keeps in information about how you need to store it, handle it, dispose of the chemicals, sort of first aid information, stuff like that. So this is a really good, and it's a legal document that gives you the information you need about certain chemicals. It says all hazardous materials have a WHMIS label, which summarizes safe handling procedures. This means that we do not have to memorize how to safely use and dispose of each chemical we have, but we have to understand what the symbols on these labels mean. So right on the right-hand side here, if we look, this is a WHMIS label that you would find on paint stripper, I guess. Quick, clean paint stripper. So WHMIS symbols, we're going to go over those in a second, but this has some symbols on it. It has a flame and it has a skull and crossbone. It literally tells you right here, danger, poisonous, and flammable. But you probably already know that fire means it's flammable. It could catch on fire. And skull and crossbones means poison. So they're pretty common ones that you guys would already know. But this is that. So these are the WHMIS symbols and their meanings. These are the ones that we have. So we've got compressed gas on the left-hand side top here. And we've got flammable and combustible material, which we just talked about. That's a little fire. Then the third one here is oxidizing material. So that is something that I guess will could catch fire in the presence of oxygen. Poisonous and infectious, these are things that basically could become an immediate toxic risk. So if you were to ingest it, get it on your skin, in your mouth, those are all things that could cause you to be poisoned. The bottom left here, poisonous and infectious material. These are also in the poison realm, but they are other toxic effects. So we might see this symbol on things that are, I guess, not necessarily immediately toxic, but if you're exposed to them over time, they can become toxic. Biohazardous infectious material, so that's something that you would see on anything that's sort of biohazard, so any sort of thing that comes from a human, I guess, or any sort of living thing, or needles or something that have blood, any sort of things that could have bodily fluids, those are all biohazardous, or they would have that label on them. Corrosive material, so corrosive means that it can burn you. It's sort of like a chemical burn. If you ever got like bleach on your hand and it sort of dries it out, that is what we would consider corrosive. So it sort of like sucks the moisture out and starts to burn the skin, and that's normally something that an acid or a base does to your skin. So try to avoid contact with your skin for sure with those corrosive materials. And then dangerously reactive materials, those are things that basically have a high chance of, reacting with many things, and we would never see this in our classroom. These would be things that might be in like industries, like the oil industry, or maybe in factories where they're using chemicals to create things, but we really don't have dangerously reactive materials. I would never feel safe having them in our classroom. So there is a video here. I'm going to post that on the Google Classroom because I can't play that inside the video, mostly because YouTube will not let me do that. So it says you don't have to do the quiz at the end. So we talked about what WHMIS is. What is MSDS? Well, MSDS is our material safety data sheets. These are basically a really long list of things, and they're really detailed on certain chemicals. They give you so much information, like the physical and chemical properties, safe handling, first aid, how to dispose of them, etc. Excuse me. So an example is argon here. You can Google any MSDS sheet. So if I wanted to be like, what's the MSDS for, I don't know, nitrogen gas, you could look it up. Like anything. If you wanted to look at bleach that's in your cupboard, you could find it. So these sheets will give you all the information you need, and a lot of stuff on here is probably beyond anything we need to know, but if you know or need to know a certain thing, it'll probably be on here. Let's say I was exposed to argon. So I go to symptom exposure. So if I'm exposed to argon, what's going to happen to me? Well, my breathing and pulse is going to increase. I'm going to have muscular coordination disturbance, emotional upset, abnormal fatigue. So it's going to tell you all the things that could happen to you. If we look at this hazardous material, and I really like this system, it shows you, they sort of rate it on a 1 or 0 to 4 scale on how much of a hazard it is to your health, how much of a hazard is to basically catch fire, and how much hazard is it to your physically. So argon is not a hazard to, it's a 0 for all of those, which makes it weird that they have these symptoms. But this is a really good place to look when you're looking at a chemical to see sort of how dangerous it might be. Okay. Some other things, and you may have talked about this before, are hazardous household product system. You've seen this probably on bottles in your cupboard, maybe cleaners and stuff like that. But this is not WHMIS symbols. These are, I guess, sort of a mainstream way, and they're not used in the workplace, but they're a separate system that represents the unique dangers that they pose, basically in the household. So danger, which would be the top, is the stop sign. So it's in that stop sign sort of thing. So like those would be the most dangerous. Warning, would be that middle one, so it's sort of like that not triangle, diamond shape, and then caution is the bottom one, so like a yield sign on the road. Those would be not as severe. Then we've got poison, which you guys know, flammable, catches fire, explosive. So normally this is like a pressurized or a gas under pressure, and then corrosive, that's something that can burn